Hey, ladies and gentlemen, the second of our back-to-back rock block, Joao Fernandes.
Can I? This is my first year to write the docs, so thanks for having me here. And my name is Joao, and today I'll talk to you about how we stopped trying to document the UI. Sorry for this. Let me just get my speaker notes here. That's it. And I'm an academy engineer, which is an interesting title for someone that writes the docs, creates free online training, and ensures our platform is easy to use. And so today, let me just walk you through what OutSystems platform is. So we create a platform that allows our users to create web apps in a visual way. So you model the data, lay out the pages, and implement all the application logic in a single IDE. And then we take care of most non-functional requirements like logging, security, and scalability. And so what I'll talk to you is how we stopped trying to document the UI and started to create what I call user story-driven documentation, which is just a funny way of saying that we now try to focus on what our users want to achieve and how they can achieve it, independently of how many windows or buttons they need to go through. So let me just give you an example of what I mean by this. We had a documentation page just for the find feature, and that doc page essentially told you everything you could learn just by looking at UI. I mean, that you can perform case-sensitive searches, match whole word, etc., and etc. But most importantly, what the documentation didn't tell you about was how to perform some pretty common tasks, such as how can I find all CSS selectors that are affecting my headings? Or how can I find all queries being made to a specific database table? And so what I'll do today is explain to you why I think documenting the UI might not be the best idea for you. Then I'll give you a checklist that you can use to validate if you're already doing it. I'll then tell you the story of how we've started to change at OutSystems, and then tell you about the process that we're using nowadays to create the docs. And I'll wrap things up by telling you what we've learned so far. So when you're creating documentation, I think it's important to see the two aspects of it. I mean, yeah, you gotta care about your users. After all, they're the reason you're creating docs in the first place. But you also need to understand the impact of what you're documenting, of your documentation, and how it will affect you and your team on the long run. Let me start first by explaining why I think documenting the UI might not be the best for your novice users. So when you're documenting the UI, you're essentially creating a siloed view of your platform. You're essentially creating documentation for windows, buttons, tools, and all that stuff. But what your novice users really care about is understanding how they can combine the several tools you have and how to change the tools you have to produce the output that they want. And so if you want to onboard your novice users really fast, what you need to do is give them these mental models, how tools can be changed. And if your documentation is just a siloed view, it's focused on a single feature, a single window, or a single button, you're essentially delegating the task of creating those mental models to the users. And so you're not guiding them. In our own case, just to give you an example, we had around 13 doc pages just to explain how to query data from the database. And even if a novice user read all these 13 pages, it was still pretty difficult to get a sense of how to achieve what they really want, which is, yeah, I want to query data from database, but then how do I display it on a screen? And I got kind of frustrated by seeing that our documentation was this way, because this is how you do it with OutSystems. So you essentially got your data model on your right-hand side, and you just drag and drop it. If you do this, you got a screen for you. And now everything works, so you just need to publish your app, And yeah, this app does what you want, which is query the data from the database, but then it also displays it on a screen. And I argue that life won't be easier for your more expert users, because what they really care about is reference docs. And from my own experience, what ends up happening when you're trying to document the UI is that you mix information that should be part of a user guide with information that is reference only. And so when you mix all this up, this is what happens. So this is a real quote from one of our users, and the guy essentially said to us that he had stopped using the docs and had to rely on his own experiments, the forum, and support tickets. And man, I get kind of sad by reading this, because I see the docs as the first line of support, as a way of avoiding support tickets. And let me also explain to you why I think documenting the UI might not be the best for you and your team. Because when you're stuck in a mindset where you need to document every window and every button and every tool, I mean, every window has the same level of priority, so it gets kind of hard to prioritize your work. And what happens is that as you try to decrease your product release cycles and you try to deploy more often, the UI is on a constant change. Every team is introducing changes to the UI. And so you just can't keep the docs updated. And this isn't the real problem. The real problem is that soon you try to fight this, creating your internal processes, and you start to focus too much on your processes that you forget and lose sight of the broader picture, which is that you need to ensure that you're delivering value to your customers. And at least for me at OutSystems, delivering value to my customers means that I ensure I help my users become badass at developing mobile and web apps. And so let me just run you through a quick checklist to validate if you're documenting UI or not. The first is that your users can't connect the dots, and the funny thing here is that you can't learn this just by looking into Google Analytics. You really need to sit down with your users and customers to learn this. The second is that everything feels like reference to you. You can't really separate on your own mind what should be part of a user guide and what is reference. And even though you got some pages that feel they are kind of different, they end up having the same information. And even though your customer base might be growing, you also got some doc pages that have a constant number of page views throughout the time. And finally, you essentially also got a huge maintenance backlog that you can't keep up with. And so, can you guess how many of the symptoms did we have at OutSystems? Yeah, let me answer that for you. Essentially all of them. So let me tell you the story of how we started the change. So around 3 years ago, it was May 2012, and as part of the release that we were making, we were working on an application lifecycle management tool, and we took that project with a different mindset. So we sat down with the development teams, product management, and support, and identified around 18 user stories that this tool would need to implement. And so what we noticed at the end of the project was that this project ended up being easier to manage because most of the dependencies were laid out in front of us. Just let me run you through an example. It didn't make much sense for us to explain to you how you can perform runtime customizations to your app if we hadn't told you even how you can deploy your app in the first place. So it was pretty easy to understand our priorities and where we essentially could cut the work and ship later if we needed to. But then, unfortunately, at the end of that project, we backtracked a bit, and this happened for two reasons. The team had some internal changes, and at that time, we were focusing a lot on our free online training, so we had to divert all resources to that project. Sorry for that. But fast forward 2 years, it's May 2014, and we're only 4 months away from another major release. And by this time, I was getting kind of frustrated because I was seeing us make the same mistakes all over again. And so I talked with the team and showed them some doc projects I really think are amazing, but I knew this wouldn't be enough to make us change the way we work. And so I also showed them how I had documented one of the flagship features for that release using user stories only. And I hadn't even tried to document UI at all. And so by that time, we all agreed that we should stop trying to do that and focus on explaining to our customers what they really wanted. But since we didn't have a clear vision of how to do this, this needed a lot of discussion. So by the end of the release, some of smaller features ended up being documented in a mix of user story and UI, which is kind of sad. And by October, we had released the product, but the team was all exhausted, and we took that as an opportunity to do a team retrospective and step down a bit to see what had worked and what didn't. So let me share with you what we think are the positive sides of the change. This was the first time in years that we had documentation ready during a beta, which is kind of awesome. We have had also some positive customer feedback even during the beta program. As I said, the work ended up being easy to prioritize, and the discussions themselves had become easier, either internally or outside our team. And so by this time, what we really needed was a kind of process just to ensure that we were able to deliver with high quality and consistently throughout the times. So let me walk you through the process that we are using nowadays at OutSystems. So most of the teams work in a mix of Scrum and Kanban, which means that usually there's a project kickoff and demos at regular intervals. And in the project kickoff, the development teams, our team, and product management sit and agree on the user stories that we'll be implementing. And so we use the demos as a touch point with the development teams just to understand when's the right time to start creating the documentation. Because if we start too early, we risk documenting features that are not mature enough. But if we start late, we risk not being able to ship documentations together with the product. And we also risk not being able to give meaningful feedback that the development teams can take back and use. And so when we feel the timing is right, we go back and get a build from the development teams and essentially implement the user stories we've agreed upon with the new features. And again, we take that feedback to the development teams. Later on, we start writing the documentation drafts, and at this point, we don't care about formatting the text, and we don't care about adding screenshots. We only care about two things, which is nailing down the right user story that our customers care about, and nailing down the right example to give support to that user story. Because later on, we've got a polishing phase where, yeah, we add formatting to the text, we add screenshots, we ensure the text is easy to read, and we got another round of feedback at the end of that stage. And so let me share with you what we've learned from going through this whole process. The first thing is that you should use smaller projects as opportunities to start changing. We also learned that someone needs to lead the change, and that someone is you. I mean, if you're frustrated with something, you should complain about it, but you should also do something about it. In my own case, I was frustrated with documentation that didn't show how easy and powerful our platform is, documentation that didn't help our users connect the dots, and a never-ending maintenance backlog that we couldn't keep up with. And so I saw how user stories could help us address some of these issues, and I started to create documentation in this way. And yeah, most of the feedback I got at the beginning was that I was creating inconsistent docs with what he had. But soon, our team started to understand the reason behind all this, and the feedback started to change. And now, documenting with user stories ended up being the status quo at my company. And finally, what we've learned also is that user stories can truly make us better developer advocates, because now we can leave our gut feelings aside when we're discussing something, and there's only two things that matter. I mean, if a user story is executed by lots of customers or by novice customers, then the tools you've got need to be straightforward to use to implement that story. And it's okay that if most customers don't care about a certain user story or they are experts, then it's okay for the tools that give support to that user story to be a bit more clunkier. And so, just to give you an example of how we've changed, this year alone we were able to convince the development teams and product management to stop developing two features that would otherwise be right now part of our product. And this means that we now have a more focused product and less code to maintain, which is always great. And we also started to receive some positive customer feedback from all this change. And so, just to wrap up, I think there's a ton to learn because I can see probably how we could use user stories to document frameworks or APIs or even some other thing that I don't even know about right now. But I'm sure some of you are already doing this, are using user stories to document APIs or some other stuff. And I would very much love to hear your own stories. So if you are, please reach back to me. Thank you.